The night I found out my daughter was married, it wasn't through a phone call, a letter, or even a whisper. It was through a photo, a perfect, smiling picture posted online. There she was, in a white gown, holding hands with a man I'd never met. And as thousands of strangers congratulated her, I sat in the dark, realizing I'd just been erased from her life. Asterisk, my name is Clara Bennett. And for 53 years, I thought I understood love, loyalty, and motherhood. I raised my only daughter, Emily, after her father passed away when she was just 12. I worked double shifts, sacrificed vacations, and sold my wedding ring to send her to college. Everything I did was for her, my pride, my purpose, my reason to keep breathing. But when I saw her wedding photos, all that love turned into something else, a storm of heartbreak, confusion, and a need for answers. What you're about to hear isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when love turns into silence. And silence turns into revenge. Asterisk, it was a Thursday night, quiet, ordinary. I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through Facebook like every other lonely evening. A notification popped up, people you may know, and there it was. Emily Bennett, my daughter's name. Her profile picture had changed. I clicked it, smiling instinctively, but then, my breath caught in the photo. Emily stood in a sunlit garden, wrapped in white lace. Her hair was curled, her makeup soft, her smile radiant. Beside her was a man I'd never seen, tall, confident, his arm around her waist. Behind them, rows of guests clapped, a pastor stood smiling, flower petals scattered in the wind. And the caption read, "Best day of our lives, #justmarried, #forever starts here." For a moment, I couldn't even process it. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands trembled on the phone screen. I zoomed in again and again, searching for anyone familiar, but there was nothing. No family, no friends I recognized. No trace of me. Just Emily. Radiant, happy, complete, in a life that clearly didn't include her mother. I tried to calm myself. Maybe it was a photo shoot. Maybe it wasn't real. But then, I saw the comments. "Congratulations, Mrs. Parker. You looked stunning, Emily. Wishing you and Daniel a lifetime of happiness." Daniel. That was his name. I scrolled further and found a full album. Our wedding, September 12th. Hundreds of photos. Her bridesmaids. The first dance. The cake cutting. Everything. Perfectly captured, and none of it included me. I stared at the screen until my tears blurred the images. When had she stopped needing me? When had she decided I was no longer worthy of being part of her life? Then, something inside me shifted. A quiet ache turned into something sharper, not rage, exactly. More like a realization. If she could build a new life without me, maybe it was time I started rewriting the rules too. And that night, I made a decision. I didn't know it yet, but it would change both of our lives forever. Asterisk, I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, the faint glow of the streetlight flickering through my blinds, painting dull orange lines across the ceiling. Every memory of Emily replayed in my mind like scenes from a movie I no longer recognized. The first time she called me mom, the way she used to run into my arms after school, clutching her drawings with proud little hands. The day she left for college, her eyes shining with excitement, mine wet with pride. But somewhere along the line, something broke. And the truth was, I didn't even notice it happening. After her father, David, passed away, Emily changed. She was only 12 and grief made her quiet, withdrawn, cold even. I tried to reach her, to fill the emptiness David's absence left behind. But maybe I tried too hard. I pushed her to talk. I made her attend therapy. I hovered over her like I could protect her from the world, but instead, I pushed her further away. By the time she turned 18, she'd learned how to smile without warmth. She barely called when she was away at college. And when she did, her words were short, polite, like talking to a stranger she was obligated to acknowledge. Still, I believed time would fix it. It always does, doesn't it? 3 years later, she came home for Christmas. Her hair was shorter, dyed chestnut brown. She looked grown, confident, composed, unreachable. We sat at the dinner table, the smell of roasted chicken and cinnamon candles filling the air. I asked her about her life, her job, her friends, and that's when she mentioned him. "His name's Daniel," she said, smiling softly. "We've been seeing each other for almost a year." The way she said it, tender, secretive, it made my stomach tighten. "You never told me," I said. "I wanted to, Mom, but you get intense about things." Her voice was calm, but her words sliced deep. "Intense," I repeated. "I'm your mother, Emily. I just care about you." "I know," she said, looking down at her plate. "That's the problem." That night, I stood in the kitchen after she'd gone to bed, listening to the quiet tick of the clock. Somewhere between love and fear, I'd lost her. After that visit, things got worse. She stopped coming home altogether. Birthdays passed without calls. When I texted, She'd reply days later, one-line messages that felt rehearsed, and then last spring. She messaged me out of nowhere, "Hey mom, can you transfer $10,000 from dad's account? I need it for something important. I'll pay you back." I didn't ask questions. I just did it. Because that's what mothers do, even when they're being used, even when they know it now. Staring at those wedding photos, I understood. That money. It paid for her dress, her venue, her new life. And I wasn't even worth a phone call. The next morning, I drove to her house. A small, two-story home near Green Lake, one I'd bought for her after graduation. It was still under my name, though I'd always told her, "It's yours when you're ready." I parked out front. Her mailbox overflowed with flyers, her curtains drawn tight. For a long minute, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel. The sound of my pulse louder than the traffic outside. Then I saw movement, her car pulling into the driveway. She stepped out, wearing sunglasses and a wide smile. Until she saw me, the smile faded instantly. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I saw your photos," I said quietly, her hand froze on her purse strap. "You what?" "Your wedding photos, Emily, online. You didn't tell me." A long silence hung between us. Wind rustled through the maple trees overhead. "Mom, I didn't want a big thing. It was private." "Private?" I interrupted. "You got married. That's not private, Emily. That's a life. That's a family." Her expression hardened. "You wouldn't have understood. Try me," I said, my voice breaking. "I've done everything for you." For a moment, her jaw trembled. Then she shook her head and walked past me toward the door. "Mom, please. Just go." And she closed the door in my face. That sound, the dull click of the latch, echoed through me like a gunshot. I stood there on her porch for what felt like hours, staring at the wood grain of the door I'd once helped her paint. I'd lost her. Not to death, not to distance, but to choice. That was the moment something inside me went still. Like a lake frozen overnight, I realized she didn't want me in her life anymore. But she'd made one mistake. She'd forgotten that the house she lived in, the one she and her new husband called home, still belonged to me. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I was going to do. For days after that confrontation, I moved through my house like a ghost. Every room echoed with silence. The kind that wraps around you until you can't tell where grief ends and rage begins. The wedding photos were still burned into my mind. Her white dress, his arm around her, the way she looked so complete without me. I'd raised her on my own for 20 years, fed her, clothed her, stayed up all night through her fevers and heartbreaks, and now I was nothing more than a name she didn't want to mention. I kept telling myself to let it go, to be the mature one. But every time I walked past my desk and saw the property file for her house sitting there, something inside me whispered, "No, not this time." The house had been a symbol of love. I'd bought it when Emily got her first job, a gift, a promise that no matter where life took her, she'd always have a place to come home to. But legally, it was still mine. I opened the drawer and pulled out the old deed, owner Clara Bennett. For years, I'd meant to sign it over to her, but something had always stopped me. A mother's instinct, maybe? Or fate. Now, that hesitation felt like the universe giving me one last card to play. That night, I called Thomas, an old friend who worked in real estate. He'd helped me with the purchase years ago. When he picked up, his voice was warm and familiar. "Clara, it's been ages. What can I do for you?" I hesitated for a second. Then I said, "Thomas, I want to sell the Green Lake property." There was a pause on the other end. "Emily's house? Are you sure?" "Yes," I said firmly. "List it quietly. Cash buyers only." He didn't question me again. By the time I hung up, my heart was pounding, not with guilt, but with clarity. For the first time in years, I felt in control. The next morning, I drove to the house again. I knew Emily and her husband, Daniel, would be at work. I parked a few houses down and walked the path to the backyard, the autumn leaves crunching beneath my shoes. From the window, I could see their life, to coffee mugs on the counter, a jacket draped over the chair, wedding photos lined neatly along the shelf. It was like a museum exhibit of happiness, curated, spotless, fake. But as I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A stack of papers sat half buried under mail on the porch. I picked them up. Final notice, overdue payment. Credit account, Daniel Parker. Amount due, $42,000. My pulse quickened. I flipped through the pages, more letters, all with Daniel's name. All past due. So that was it. The charming, smiling man beside my daughter wasn't just keeping me out. He was drowning them both in debt. Later that day, I looked him up online. It didn't take long. A few old business records, a suspended contractor's license, a string of complaints, and then one article that made my stomach drop. Daniel Parker, former financial advisor accused of fraudulent investment practices. It was dated 2 years ago. Just months before Emily met him. I sat back in my chair, my hands cold, my throat dry. Everything clicked into place. He wasn't just after love, he was after security. After her money. After my house and my daughter, blinded by affection. Had handed him everything except the one thing he couldn't touch, ownership. That's when I knew what I had to do. A week later, Thomas called. "Clara, you're not going to believe this," he said. "We got an offer. Full cash, above market. They can close in 7 days, take it," I said quietly. "Emily's going to be shocked. She made her choices," I replied. "Now I'm making mine." I hung up, staring out the window at the falling rain. Seattle looked gray and endless, the sky heavy with unspoken things. Was it revenge? Maybe, but it was also a lesson, a cruel, necessary one. Because sometimes, you have to let people lose something precious to remember who gave it to them in the first place. I could already imagine the call. Emily coming home from work, finding strangers walking through her living room, realizing the house was no longer hers. The disbelief, the anger, the betrayal, the same emotion she'd handed me weeks earlier. Only this time, she'd understand what it felt like to be cut out of your own life. But beneath the satisfaction, there was something else. A quiet ache. Because even now, even after everything, I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted her to see me again. To remember that I was still here. I looked down at the wedding photo on my phone. Her smile frozen in a world that didn't include me. I whispered, "You took me out of your story, Emily, but I'm still the one who wrote the first chapter." And as the papers went through, as signatures were stamped and wires transferred, a small part of me hoped she'd call just once. To ask why. To say sorry. To say mom. But she didn't, not yet. It was late afternoon when the call finally came. I'd been sitting by the window, a mug of cold coffee in my hands, staring at the rain streaking down the glass. The city was quiet. My house smelled faintly of lavender and regret. Then my phone buzzed. Emily's name flashed on the screen. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I answered, "Mom." Her voice was sharp, almost panicked. "Hello, Emily," I said calmly. "Don't hello me. What the hell did you do?" I let the silence linger, heavy, deliberate. "You sold my house?" she shouted. You can't just do that. People are walking through it right now." I could hear noise in the background, voices, doors opening, footsteps echoing. "It's my house, Emily," I said softly. "No, it's mine. You said, you told me, I told you it would be yours when you were ready." I paused, then added, "I guess you weren't." The line went quiet. Then I heard a small, shaky breath on the other end. "How could you do this to me?" she whispered. "You did it first," I said. "You got married without me. You erased me from your life. You made me feel like I never existed." Her voice broke. "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me, Emily," I cut in. "What was it like? Watching strangers clap while your own mother found out through Facebook?" There was a rustle, maybe she'd sunk to the floor. I could hear her crying now, quietly, the way she used to when she was little and scraped her knees. But this time, I didn't move to comfort her. "I just wanted peace, Mom," she said finally. "You were always too much. You hovered, you questioned, you made me feel small. Daniel made me feel free." "Free," I repeated, tasting the word like poison. "Free enough to take my money for your wedding? Free enough to lie?" She gasped softly. "What? You think I don't know? The $10,000 from your father's account. The same week you booked your venue, I was going to pay you back." "No," I interrupted. "You weren't." The silence between us was thunderous. And then, faintly, I heard another voice, a man's voice. "Who are you talking to?" It was him, Daniel. "It's my mother," Emily said, her tone tight. "Your mother?" He scoffed. "Tell her to stop interfering. This is our house now." Something inside me twisted cold. "Our house?" I said, raising my voice just enough for him to hear. Interesting word choice. "Because legally, Daniel, it was never yours." "Listen, Mrs. Bennett," he started, but I cut him off. "No, you listen. You married my daughter for what she could offer: a home, stability, a clean start. I've seen your records. The debts, the fraud complaints, the lies." There was a long pause. Then, for the first time, he spoke with his real voice, low, sharp, dangerous. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "And now that the house is sold, you'll both have to find somewhere else to play pretend." Emily started crying harder. "Mom, please. You're ruining everything." "No, Emily," I said softly. "I'm saving you." "From what?" "From him." She laughed through tears, disbelieving. "You don't know him." "I know enough," I said. Enough to recognize the look in his eyes. "It's the same one your father used to warn me about. The kind that wants to take until there's nothing left." Her sobs quieted. And for a moment, I thought she understood. Then Daniel grabbed the phone. "You think you can just do this? You're a bitter old woman who can't let go." His words hit like slaps. But my voice stayed steady. "Maybe, but bitter women survive. Bitter women own the deeds." Bitter women protect what's left of their families, and before he could respond, I hung up. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat by the fire listening to the crackle of wood, the faint hiss of the rain outside. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not the soft kind, but the hard-earned kind that comes after a storm still. I couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Would she hate me forever? Would she see the truth? I didn't know. But I knew one thing, the sale was already final. There was no going back. 3 days later, I got an email from Thomas. The house had officially transferred to its new owner. The money had cleared. I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and whispered to the empty room, "Goodbye. Emily, I hope one day you'll understand," but deep down, I knew that wasn't the end. Because girls like Emily, they don't stay quiet. And men like Daniel, they don't take defeat lightly. And when the truth finally came out, it would burn brighter than any revenge I could have planned. The message came on a Sunday morning. Short, simple, "Mom, I need to see you, please." It had been a week since I sold the house. A week since that final phone call. I hadn't expected to hear from her again, at least not so soon, for a long time. I just stared at the screen, my heart heavy with 1,000 emotions, anger, guilt, love. They all blended into something wordless. Finally, I replied, "Come over." When I opened the door, she was standing there, drenched from the rain, her eyes red and puffy. She looked nothing like the glowing bride from those photos. For a moment, we just stood there, silence pressing between us like glass. Then, quietly, I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked in slowly, her shoes leaving faint wet marks across the hardwood floor. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "You were right." I blinked, unsure what she meant. "About what?" She swallowed hard, tears brimming in her eyes. "About him. About Daniel." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where we'd once shared birthdays and late-night cocoa. Now, it felt like a confession booth. "What happened?" I asked softly. She hesitated, staring down at her trembling hands. "When the house was sold, Daniel freaked out. He said it was illegal, that we could fight it. But when I asked him to calm down, he lost it." Her voice shook. "He started shouting, packing his things, saying he couldn't live like this. He took our savings. Every penny. Then he left though." "Emily," I whispered. "I didn't want to believe you," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But then I checked his emails. His accounts, Mom. He's been married before, twice, and both women filed bankruptcy after he left them." My breath caught. "My God, he used me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He used me just like them. I thought I found love, but I just found another lie." She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. And all my anger, all the righteous fury I'd been carrying, melted away in an instant. Because no matter what she'd done, she was still my daughter. My little girl. Broken, scared, and lost, I moved to her side and wrapped my arms around her, feeling her body shake against mine. "It's okay," I whispered, stroking her hair. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now." For a long time, we just sat there, holding on to each other like the world outside didn't exist. When she finally looked up, her eyes were raw but clearer. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said quietly. "You don't need to deserve it," I replied. "You're my daughter." She nodded slowly, tears still clinging to her lashes. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box, the kind that holds something precious. She opened it to reveal her wedding ring. "I don't want it," she said. "Not anymore." I looked at the ring, gold, delicate, still shining despite everything. "Keep it," I said softly. "Let it remind you not of him, but of who you were when you still believed in something good." For the first time in months, she smiled, faint, fragile, but real. "What happens now?" she asked. I took her hand gently. "Now, we start over, together." She let out a shaky laugh. "You really sold the house?" "Completely," I said with a half smile. "And let's just say the buyer was generous." Her brows furrowed. "Wait, who bought it?" I hesitated, then smiled. "A woman I met through Thomas. A widow with 2 teenage kids. She said she wanted a place that felt like a new beginning. So, you helped another family start over," she murmured. "Maybe that's what I was meant to do," I said quietly. "End one chapter, so another could begin." Outside, the rain had slowed to a gentle drizzle. Emily stood by the window, watching it fall. "I miss Dad," she said softly. "Me too," I whispered. "He'd probably tell us we're both stubborn fools," she said with a small laugh. "He'd be right," I replied. She turned to me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw my daughter again. Not the distant woman behind the phone screen. Not the bride in the photos. Just Emily. That night, after she left to stay at a friend's place, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The air was still. The house felt lighter somehow. I opened my laptop and looked at the transaction receipt from the house sale. The amount sitting quietly in my account. Enough for her to rebuild. Enough for both of us to heal. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel bitterness. Just closure. Because maybe revenge wasn't about making someone suffer. Maybe it was about showing them the truth and giving them a chance to come home again. It had been 3 months since that rainy morning. 3 months since my daughter came back to me, fragile, wounded, but ready to heal. The seasons had begun to shift. Summer was ending and the air carried the crisp whisper of autumn. The kind of air that makes you remember and release. I'd moved into a smaller house on the edge of town, quieter, simpler. The kind of place that didn't echo with old arguments or regrets. Sometimes, I missed the sound of her footsteps upstairs, the creak of her door opening in the middle of the night. But now, I also had peace. That morning, a letter arrived. No email, no text, a real letter folded neatly inside a soft cream envelope. The handwriting made my heart skip. Mom, I sat by the window, the light filtering through lace curtains, and read her words slowly. Mom, I don't know where to begin. I'm still finding my way, but every day, I think of you. I'm working again, helping out at a local gallery. It feels good to use my hands to create something, even if it's small. Sometimes I walk past places that remind me of home. The old coffee shop, the bookstore we used to go to. And I think about how I spent so long trying to build a life far away from you, when all I really needed was to understand you. I know you sold the house not out of hate, but because you needed to protect what was left of us. I see that now. Thank you for saving me from something worse. Thank you for being the kind of mother who never gave up, even when I deserved it the least. I love you, Mom. Emma Libby. The time I finished reading, tears blurred the ink. Outside, leaves swirled through the air, orange, red, and gold, the colors of change. I looked at the empty mug beside me, still half filled with cold coffee, and laughed softly. It was the first truly happy sound I'd made in a while. She was finding her way back. And somehow, so was I that weekend. I drove to the lake where my husband and I used to take Emily when she was little. The water was calm, shimmering under the pale morning sun. I brought with me the small velvet box she had left behind, the one with her wedding ring. I opened it, running my fingers over the smooth metal. It no longer felt like a symbol of pain. It was a reminder of endings that lead to beginnings. I whispered, almost to myself. Let this go where it belongs, and then I tossed the ring into the water. It made a soft splash, disappearing into ripples that faded slowly across the lake's surface. For a moment, I stood there, feeling the cool wind against my skin. Then I closed my eyes, and I smiled. On the drive home, I turned on the radio. A familiar song played, the one Emily used to hum as a child. It felt like a message, carried on the airwaves from one heart to another. We're okay now, I whispered. We'll be okay. When I reached home, I opened my laptop and began writing a short email. Subject, just checking in. Proud of you. Always have been. Love, Mom. I hit send and leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet fill the room. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive with fireworks or apologies. It arrives quietly, like dawn. Soft, steady, and certain. That night, as I looked out the window at the city lights below, I thought about everything we'd been through, the silence, the betrayal, the heartbreak. And somehow, all of it made sense, because life isn't about holding on forever. It's about knowing when to let go, and when to love anyway. *****. When I saw her wedding photos, I thought I'd lost my daughter forever. But sometimes, losing someone is the only way they can find their way home. If my story touched your heart, like, share, or channel co-subscribe Kareen.